On September 29, 2011, our civics class decided to take a trip to the American Independence Museum in Exeter, New Hampshire. Our field trip centered around the influence a small New Hampshire town had on the development and ratification of the Constitution.
So our civics class arrived in Exeter at about 9:30, I'm going to say, because we stopped at Dunkin' Donuts on the way in for breakfast. And Exeter's just this beautiful, beautiful old mill town from the late 1600s.
Exeter is a small town in southeastern New Hampshire, centered around the falls where the freshwater Exeter River meets the salty tidal Squamscott. Exeter's first immigrants came in 1638 from England through Massachusetts. Reverend John Wheelwright purchased the territory for settlement from local Indian chiefs. He had been exiled by the Massachusetts Bay Colony and took with him about 175 people to the town he named after Exeter in Devon, England. Exeter was unusual among the first New Hampshire towns because it was established with religious motivations rather than commercial. Wheelwright and his followers were Puritans who had left England to escape religious persecution. They then fled Massachusetts after Wheelwright was banished due to church conflicts there. Wheelwright established a church soon after he arrived at the Squamscott River. This was Exeter's only church for more than a century. Although there were a few scattered settlers in the area before Wheelwright arrived, the title of founder belongs to him because he brought a number of colonists with him and provided an organized government. Some early settlers came from Hingham, Massachusetts, including the Gilman, Folsom, and Leavitt families, all of whom contributed to Exeter's growth.
In 1795, there were 2 waterfalls in the town that run a total of 11 mills, which were 4 grist mills, 4 sawmills, 2 mills for pressing linseed oil from flaxseed, and a fulling mill for cleaning woolen cloth. On the river, there were seagoing vessels to and from Exeter. There were also a number of ships being made in Exeter. Due to the ships being made in Exeter and being brought over to the British Empire, it was a busy port in the 1800s, bringing in a lot of money to the town. One of the bigger manufacturing companies was owned by Nicholas Gilman in 1803. He owned a car-dealing comb to comb wool fibers from yarn in the upper part of the village. In 1880, there were 20,000 spindles and 452 looms, which in a year produced 4 million yards of cloth a year. Exeter had the first gunpowder factories, paper, chocolate, and many grist mills and sawmills in New Hampshire.
Tenuous at best was all he had to say, wasn't pressed about the rest of it, the world that is. From Proto-Sanskrit Minoans to Proto-centric Lisboans, Greeks, Cypriots, and Habasats who hang around the ports a lot on.
Prior to the nationwide pursuit of independence, New Hampshire sought not to break away from Great Britain, but instead to make peace.
So what was the point of the New Hampshire Constitution?
Well, basically what the New Hampshire Constitution is that the colony was being controlled by Great Britain at the time, and it was more an issue of financial control, and they just felt that there were a ton of restrictions being placed on them. So their deal was that they were just getting really upset with Great Britain, and so what they want to do is to make peace with them. And it was interesting that instead of declaring their independence, which is what the Declaration of Independence did, they instead want to try and make peace. So it wasn't necessarily a matter of declaring their independence or even going that far, but it was more the matter of making sure everything was worked out between them. But we know that 6 months later, that wasn't going to be the case.
On July 4th, 1776, our founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence. Directly after it was released, John Dunlap, an owner of a printing house, published the Declaration in a newspaper, the Pennsylvania Evening Post. These copies are known as the Dunlap Broadside copies.
So, the Dunlap Broadside is the first published draft of the Declaration of Independence. They were printed on July 4th, 1776 by John Dunlap, who essentially gave the name to the Dunlap Broadside. John Dunlap was born in 1747 in Ireland. In 1757, he was sent to Philadelphia as an apprentice to his uncle. About 10 years later, his uncle gave him his printing house to take care of. Because his uncle left him his printing house, he became the first person to print the Declaration of Independence. There are about 200 printed, and only 26 are still known to exist. He published a copy in his newspaper, the Pennsylvania Evening Post. He later became known as the founder of the nation's first successful daily newspaper. The Dunlap Broadside is the first official recorded document of the American Declaration of Independence. It is joined with the signed one as the founding record of the United States of America.
Okay, so what was your favorite part about the field trip?
My favorite part about the field trip was the desk, the Washington desk that was in the room with the preamble, and how it had so many desks and it was double-sided, and also how the Dunlap Broadside Constitution was found in the attic, and how it might have been found for security reasons, for they didn't want it to be found because they were afraid, and also for insulation. Yeah, that was my favorite part.
For insulation?
Yeah, they said that the paper might have helped with insulation.
I think the insulation in the ceiling helped the paper from getting ruined.
That quite possibly could have been too.
So we arrive at the American Independence Museum's parking lot in our school's minibus. And when you walk into the building, there's this little narrow hallway that we all filed into. And to the left, there's the gift shop where you go when you're really excited and you're in 3rd grade. And then to the right, there's the Lieutenant Gookin room. And that room was all about John Langdon and his life.
After the United States became an independent nation, it was in need of a strong central government. This led to the formation of the Constitution. Exeter played a large role in this process, as 2 of its residents represented New Hampshire in order to aid in this process. The lead representative was John Langdon.
In 1783 and 84, he was elected to the Continental Congress, but he declined to keep serving in New Hampshire. And also in 84, he was elected a state senator. And then in 1786, the U.S. was in trouble because their government was kind of weak and they didn't know how to turn the nation around. So he was elected as a delegate to the Constitutional Convention to reconstruct the government. He was in favor of big government, so they thought he would bring a strong mind to it. In 1787, he returned to New Hampshire to get the Constitution ratified. And New Hampshire became the 9th state on July 21st, 1788 to ratify the Constitution.
Langdon's running mate was Nicholas Gilman. Gilman later served under Washington during the Revolutionary War and made important connections which would later lead him into one of the greatest roles in all of American history.
In July of 1786, New Hampshire appointed Gilman to the Continental Congress and commissioned him to serve as a representative in the Constitutional Convention. The goal for the convention was to nail down the compromises needed to produce a document that might win in approval in every state and region, aka the Constitution.
As a true patriot, one of Gilman's main goals was to make measures to protect the common man in today's society, the Joe the plumber, from the abuses of power by big government. Both he and John Langdon, his fellow delegate, participated in the debates and discussions in Philadelphia, and although we're from a small state, they played no small role. In September 1787, Gilman became one of the youngest of the 39 signers of the United States Constitution. Gilman was then elected a New Hampshire representative in 1789. He served 4 terms in that role and then was elected senator in 1805. During his senatorship, he did pass away, but his family continued on as the frontrunners of New Hampshire politics.
These 2 young men, along with 37 other representatives, spent hundreds of hours in secret and confidential meetings, developing many drafts and ideas in order to create a system of government which was, as Abraham Lincoln later phrased it, of the people, by the people, for the people. This was the Constitutional Convention. The Constitution has become the icon of the American system and freedoms, but there were several components that need to come together to create this document.
There was 2 main groups, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. But the Federalists believed in a strong central government where the government would have a lot of power, and the Anti-Federalists didn't want that. They wanted to decentralize the government so that the people would have more power. And I also found an interesting note that the word democracy does not appear in the Constitution, which I wouldn't assume. So 2 plans arose. One was the Virginia Plan, which stated having a strong national government with 3 branches, the executive, the legislature, and the judicial. And the larger states like this one because it gave them more power. The second plan was the New Jersey Plan, which believed in a decentralized government, and each state would get 1 vote in Congress. And the smaller states like that one because it had all the states equal in votes.
Although the Constitution was ultimately ratified, the process of getting there was extremely arduous. And in order to appease and to make the document more effective, the Bill of Rights was added.
What was your favorite part of the document?
Well, we did an activity on the preamble, and that was cool because we got to see the different ways that they were going to write the preamble.
And in complete honesty, was the preamble activity that helpful?
No. All the questions asked the same exact thing, but you know.
During our trip, we were shown Nicholas Gilman's edited copies of the Constitution. He looked carefully over the document and made marginal notes where he saw changes or improvements needed to be made. Gilman left us with an interesting statement.
Well, he said, "It is the best that could meet the unanimous concurrence of the states in convention. It was done by bargain and compromise, yet, notwithstanding its imperfections, on the adoption of it depends, in my feeble judgment, whether we shall become a respectable nation, or a people torn to pieces and rendered contemptible for all ages." So the point that the purpose of this quote is that he's saying that the Constitution is a rough outline of how the government is to be run, and not everybody necessarily bought in to it, and it was work in progress, and so he's saying that this thing isn't without flaws, and it could work or it could fall apart, and thankfully it ended up working.
And then in the middle of the museum, there's this little green, winding, narrow staircase that led to the second floor, which is mainly about the Society of Cincinnati.
During this whole process, another alliance was developing. In 1783, the Society of Cincinnati was born. The purpose of the group was to preserve the rights and liberties for which the veterans had fought. The society was criticized early on by a few key players in American history, including Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, primarily for its policy of primogeniture, or giving membership to the firstborn descendants of the original members.
The spirit of recognition of veterans and all that continued well until the modern day, and eventually that kind of idea started the whole Department of Veterans Affairs, which is now a full cabinet position. We've got the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. And they took care of everything from the first veterans receiving pensions in 1834 all the way up to these now modern veteran pension systems. Society now, its basic job is to continue the education of early American history and preservation of things like this house and all the historical artifacts here. And as you can tell by the fact that we're in this field trip, they're doing a pretty good job of that.
Excellent.
We concluded our tour with a visit to one of the Society's most visited locations, the Folsom Tavern. The tavern was built around 1775 by John Folsom on a piece of land which had been part of the Folsom family property for a long time. The house burned down around 1768, but was replaced by John's great-grandson, Colonel Samuel Folsom, who built and kept the Folsom Tavern.
Now you're not so sure you want to go through with this. Not so sure you want to go through with this life thing. It's a trifling.
The tavern, due to its central location, would see several important historic events. On November 19th, 1783, officers from the Revolutionary War would meet at the tavern to first organize the local society of Cincinnati. In a better-known episode, on the morning of November 4th, 1789, President George Washington came to Exeter. He traveled by horse and stopped for refreshment at the Folsom Tavern. Samuel Folsom's niece, Margaret Emery, waited upon the president, but he didn't stay long because he needed to keep a previous engagement in Haverhill that afternoon. Colonel Folsom died mere months later, in May of 1790, and his widow Elizabeth would continue to keep the tavern for a number of years. After her death, the tavern passed through many hands, and it was moved to a second foundation around the turn of the 20th century, when Water Street was widened by the town. This required the removal of the original large central chimney of the house, and moreover, shops and a train station, street railway station, were placed underneath the building. In 1929, the house was given to the Society of Cincinnati, and the tavern was moved again to its present location, or more or less its present location, on the corner of Water and Spring Streets. The building was restored around the 1940s, I believe, and a good degree of the original craftsmanship and design was revealed.
While at the museum, we participated in a rough reenactment of the types of meetings which would have taken place at the tavern. It exemplified the sorts of struggles which Federalists and Anti-Federalists experienced during the constitutional debates. Here are a few key excerpts.
Let us begin by discussing the issue of biennial election.
I am strongly against biennial elections. Annual elections have been the practice of this state since its beginning. There has never been an objection to this type of election, which is considered the safeguard of people's liberty. Making a change might lead to elections for life.
It has been asked why annual elections are not preferable to biennial. The reply to that is that if annual elections are good, biennial elections are even better.
It does not follow, because annual elections are safe, that biennial are dangerous. Both may be good.
They can both be good, but biennial elections are preferable because of the size of the country.
2 years will allow people to have evidence that he has done well.
Ooh. You go, girl! Time is short. Let's move on to the next issue.
So we've been to the museum, we've been to the tavern, we've done our speeches, we've done the skit, and we're all really hungry at this point. And so we all figured that the best part about a field trip is the food. So we decided to go to Me and Ollie's for lunch.
What did you think about the food?
Food was fantastic. Very good.
Great.
Dunkin' Donuts, not so much.
After we went to me and Ollie's, we realized we had like an hour and a half to kill. So we decided to go to a chocolate shop downtown Exeter.
What was your favorite part about the trip?
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Did you actually buy any chocolate?
Yeah, I love chocolate.
What did you buy?
But chocolate bar.
Kids kind of went nuts. A lot of kids bought a lot of chocolate.